I think it's very clear that Iran cannot possess a weapon with nuclear capabilities. And because it has claimed that it will wipe Israel off the map, I think that is where job one begins. We have got to honor our obligation to Israel, one of our longest and dearest allies. They are a very important part of many people in this country's lives. It is a country that it shares our values, it shares our interests. It's a trade partners of ours, a technology partner of ours, and again, one of our strongest allies. So the question really becomes, as I see it, is that it seems to me that Israel might be the country that has to take the first step in this. And I have listened for a long time about, I guess you call it speculation, about how it would be that Israel would take out their nuclear facilities. Quite frankly, they took out the facilities in Syria right after Nancy Pelosi went there in 2007. So I would not deign to say that I know the inner workings of our security policy. But again, with the idea that, I think everyone's known for a while that we have to deal with Iran's weapons, and actually I think the sooner we do it, the better. And it will probably be with Israel's help, because they are the most vulnerable player in this area of the world.
Mr. Dennis?
Thanks, Arthur. I was happy to see over yesterday, I think it was, that Admiral Mullen, the Joint Chiefs of Joint Chiefs Chairman, said that there were, of course, military options, but he felt at the end of the day that the solution will be diplomatic. There's good news and bad news in dealing with Iran. Of course, Iran is not allowed to have weapons-grade nuclear materials. It is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and all countries that don't have weapons-grade nuclear material are not allowed to have them. So that's the bad news if they're working in that direction. Here's the good news. The good news is that if you read every single article that's out there right now, both the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, and the CIA, their own national intelligence estimate says that Iran has stayed within the confines of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We have a tricky bit of business with the NPT because there are 189 signatories there. And if we don't honor the agreement, if we don't allow Iran to work with nuclear materials for peaceful purposes, all the other signatories are going to say, what is this document worth? So there's one other bit of business, too, that we have to be careful about. Israel, I think rightly, in 1981, attacked the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq. And while she had every right to do that, there was one unintended consequence that we did not discover until by accident in 1990. When we invaded Iraq, we found that we'd actually driven the Iraq nuclear program underground. So one thing that we can say now is at least we have, at the Natanz facility and the Qom facility, we have cameras. The Qom facility does not have centrifuges there. And the one thing I think we should do is keep that program above ground for as long as possible.
Do you have a rebuttal or comment?
Well, I would just say that some of the organizations on which we're relying, I have sometimes less than great faith in what they've said. Obviously, I don't think we knew that they were this close to reaching us till yesterday. But I think the real question is, what do we do now? And again, I think we have to make it very clear that we will support Israel and that they are a player in this, and that we, of course, will do everything diplomatically that we can, but we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And we have to understand, too, there's probably not a country in that part of the world that wants them to have it. So diplomacy will, in fact, become a very important part of this problem, or the solution to this problem.
The second question, as they're gathering, I have only two questions on foreign policy from the audience, but I'm going to do a follow-up question that I think should focus the first question a little more. If a Syrian-supported Hezbollah group detonated a small nuclear device in San Francisco's financial district with heavy casualties, making the area uninhabitable for at least 3 years, what should be the U.S. response? John Dennis?
So the question is, if a Syria-supported Hezbollah nuclear attack happened in San Francisco, what should we do?
And it's clear that Syria is sponsoring Hezbollah rather than some vague terrorist group.
Well, our response should be as we would respond to any sort of attack. It should be swift, it should be ferocious, and it should end all discussion. And whether or not it should be nuclear, I think, is left to the military folks and the commander-in-chief to decide. This is also another delicate question, and I think that one of the things that we might consider as well is how to address groups like Hezbollah in the first place. You know, right now, part of our foreign policy has been to handcuff Israel. Israel has trouble with Hamas in the south. They've got trouble with Hezbollah in the north. Perhaps if we took the handcuffs off of Israel, maybe we would actually not have to worry so much about issues like Hezbollah.
Dana Walsh?
That came out of left field because that's not the usual response I think of getting from John. But that said, Israel is in a position right now where they're being treated as less than the ally they've always been for us. So I'm sure that they are looking at their options in a slightly different way. I don't know that it addresses your specific question about a nuclear explosion here. To address that, again, I would have to agree with John that we would have to rely on the military response, I think not just of the military and the political groups we have, but our intelligence. And I'm a little concerned because I don't think our intelligence is as well funded as it should be. I would be very, I think it's sort of an interesting question for a junior congressperson to be asked that. But I would say I would definitely believe we would have to make a quick, I agree with John, that we would have to make a swift response and a very definite response. I don't know that a nuclear response would be the answer.
Just a quick rebuttal. Yeah, the response shouldn't be all that, ought not to be all that surprising for the strongest of national defenses. Of course, it is an appropriate role of the federal government. The preamble of the Constitution says that we join together to create a common defense. And this is what the federal government should do, so it shouldn't be that surprising. So anyway.
The next question is from the audience. Do you think the U.S. should be encouraging democracy abroad, and if so, to what extent? To Dana.
That's mine. Actually, I do. Again, I ran against Nancy Pelosi and Cindy Sheehan in the last election, and I remember there was a picture that was very important to me as I ran that race. And it was a picture, and I'm sure you probably all remember, it was an iconic picture of a woman with her burqa off her face with a big smile, and she was holding up her purple finger. Now, they had a 97% rate, 97% participation rate in democracy. I think that same year in California, the number of voters we had was something like 38% of the electorate in the primary and about 60% in that year of our own citizens in our election. So I think there is a place for democracy. I do, too. I remember I attended something at Stanford, and I remember one of the speakers there said, you know, the truth of the matter is, in the Middle East, we've always said, just give us your oil, do what you want with your people. And I think at some point that is something that has been addressed, and I think that we're seeing that as tough as it's been, Iraq is rising to the challenge, and I think Afghanistan will, too. They're having their problems, but every new democracy has those problems, and I think that democracy throughout the world is the best solution because as citizens become more in control of their lives, they do not let these despots and dictators do many of the things that we're facing right now with countries like Iran and Venezuela, et cetera.
John?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Arthur. Yes, I do think we can encourage democracy abroad, just not through force. We can do it by example, but this making the world safe for democracy and building democracy is, I don't think it should be the American foreign policy, and frankly, it is not the U.S., it should not be the Republican foreign policy. I mean, this making the world safe for democracy is straight out of Woodrow Wilson era progressivism. It is not what this country was founded on. And our party has a long tradition of not participating in that sort of foreign policy. We stand today in, of all buildings, the one named after Hiram Johnson. Hiram Johnson was not only a Republican, that's right, we have a Republican